I was photoing, but not videoing. Okay, so what Charlie is doing is called the Florida weave. It was invented by a guy in Texas named Bob, according to Charlie.
No, a little farm humor.
Okay. But what the Florida weave does is it helps the plants just stand up. And as he goes through the plants, he's also pulling some of the foliage off because tomatoes produce way more foliage than they need. And by trimming some of the foliage off, he gets
better quality fruit.
Better quality fruit. Thank you, Charlie. And it also makes it easier to pick the tomatoes.
And see when they're ripe.
Especially when they're ripe, yeah. But what he's doing now is every about 10 feet, he's got a 7-foot post and he ties the string around it and then he begins wrapping the tomatoes. Now with the Florida weave, what he does is he'll go down one side of the plant on the way up and then come back down and tie the other side of the plant up, and that's how the plant is supported. So it actually makes a little crisscross, you can see right here, and it supports the plants. But the biggest benefit is that it helps the plants get more air. It makes it way easier to pick fruit off the plants. He's also doing a little bit of pruning because, like we said earlier, tomatoes produce more foliage than they need.
And suckers create problems.
And by pulling the suckers off, it just makes for a healthier plant.
More clearance to the bottom of the plant too, which also helps prevent any of your blights and that kind of stuff. You try not to have it touching the ground. These tomatoes out here, since we have a greenhouse full of tomatoes, they don't get near the attention that
the greenhouse ones do.
Just for the simple fact, there's about 580 in the 2 greenhouses, and there's about 500 out here. So we'll just kind of see what our tomato year is, but these typically do pretty good outside once it warms up.
But he always starts with the rows with the tallest posts, because by the time he gets done doing 2 rows of these, it can be pretty tiring. And
that's when you got 4 to do.
Yeah. And so that's why he does the tall posts first. And plus he kind of engages by how much growth has happened since the last time he did a weave.
Which plants need it first?
Yes.
Or which can go a couple days, like the Romas behind Paula.
These right here.
They can go probably 2-3 more days. The rest of them, they should really be tied up tonight. Because once we get the rain, these things are going to shoot up again. Even though we got plastic protecting the plants, they still get water and it'll shoot them up.
Now, these are what, indeterminate tomatoes, right, Charlie?
Yep, indeterminate tomatoes.
And what does that mean?
Okay, two different types of tomatoes. Determinate, which is your Romas. They're usually the bush varieties are determinate. They only get 3.5–4 foot tall, and that's all the taller they're going to get. Indeterminate, as long as we have good weather, they will keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. Where the Romas is majority of the fruit's all going to come ripe at the same time. This is going to come ripe at multiple different times.
So they're going to be a little staggered in their ripeness.
A little bit more staggered. Okay, what do we got going on here? It must have slipped over. Maybe. Okay, we're going to have to check that one.
So what kind of indeterminate tomatoes do you have?
Oh, I've got beefsteak, big boys, big girls, Brandywines, Better Boys, Cherokee purples, celebrity, gosh, let me think, I'm missing a couple. Mr. Stripey's, Big Zac's. Big Zac's supposed to get 4 to 6 pounds.
That's a big tomato.
I bought them just to see if I can get a tomato 4 to 6 pounds. So we'll see. We'll know by the end of the season. The nice thing is at $2 a pound, if it was a 6-pound tomato, that'd be 12 bucks. So
Yeah.
for one pick, that's pretty cost efficient.
So what's your favorite tomato?
Oh boy, it depends. I like the Mr. Stripey's. I like
Now, is Mr. Stripey a red tomato or is it another color?
it's just what its namesake says.
Okay.
It's kind of a orangish red
Okay.
with stripes.
Okay. And I know the Cherokee purple is kind of a dark purple with green.
Yeah, with a little bit of green.
With a little bit of green.
I mean, it really depends on the application. If you like beautiful salsa, most of your indeterminate tomatoes are much better than your determinate tomatoes. They typically have better flavor. You know, you go into a store and you buy a tomato, it's bred for its shippability, not for its taste. Meaning it looks beautiful, but it's thick-walled, it's a drier tomato, it's not as juicy. So, me personally, I lied, we only have 1,079 tomato plants. I forgot the deer got that one.
Whoops.
But
Dead tomato plant.
so I don't want to lie to my fans out there. But you know, it really depends. They've got so many awesome tomatoes these days. But I think nothing beats a Brandywine on a BLT.
Yeah.
Or beefsteak.
Yeah, beefsteaks are a really good tomato.
Yeah, Brandywines are too.
And I know, Charlie, you know, that some of these tomatoes are not the prettiest tomatoes per se, but I think in the long run they are prettier just because they have more colors to them and variations to them.
They're pretty tasty compared
and they're really tasty.
Yeah, you get a Brandywine and it's a big ugly tomato, but boy, just nothing beats it, or a Belgian red. Just an amazing tomato.
So what's your most interesting tomato experiment for this year?
The Big Zac.
The Big Zac?
I saw them, and when I read 4 to 6 pound fruit, I went, we gotta try that.
Yeah.
So that is probably the most interesting tomato I have.
Right.
But the dumbest thing I did this year was,
according to your wife anyway,
according to my wife and myself, was it must have been really hot that day, but Charlie thought it'd be a good idea to plant 48 plants of different varieties of cherry tomatoes.
So what kind of cherry tomatoes do you have?
I got Juliet's, which are basically the cherry tomatoes, and then I got the Sun Sugars. That's pretty much the gist of the plants I got this year. What is going on with this tomato? It's gangly as all get out. You need to go bye-bye, because I need to capture you. And a lot of people go, oh my gosh, I can't believe you do that to, you know, you took away half the plant. Well, again, it's trying to get it to grow right. And
I can testify, folks, when he was stationed at Offutt Air Force Base, I remember Charlie posting pictures of wheelbarrows full of tomatoes, which I thought was pretty amazing.
Bet the neighborhood, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah, some folks think it's pretty brutal to rip that much of a plant off since it's got all that growing. But bottom line is tomatoes touching the ground rot.
Yeah.
Which invite pests.
Right.
Which then eat your very beautiful tomatoes up towards the top. So it's better just, you know, it's better to catch them earlier.
So the row behind Charlie, I believe, is Roma's too, right, Charlie?
No, this is actually a commercial variety.
Oh, okay.
They're a bush type tomato. Because I do have people that care more about pretty than they care about flavor, so, okay. You know, I'm willing to accommodate them if that's what they want.
Right.
So
have you had any special requests from customers for certain kinds of tomatoes?
The Brandywines, a lot of people like Brandywines.
Right.
And the beefsteaks, those are if it was up to me, I'd grow about 20 different varieties just so people can taste the different flavors out of tomatoes. There's a tomato out there called the Green Zebra, which couldn't find seed for or plants for this year.
Green Zebras are good tomatoes.
Green Zebras are an excellent, excellent tomato, but you wouldn't think so looking at them.
So are your Brandywines all red Brandywines, or did you get some of the yellow Brandywines too?
They're the reddish pinks.
Oh, okay.
I'm guessing.
You could get surprised.
I could get surprised, but I doubt it. Because it was bought at a greenhouse, and they're not going to grow a ton of exotic tomatoes unless people get tomato crazy and people start demanding it. But again, if you look at the original tomato, the original tomato vine came out of Peru, from what my understanding of what I've read, and it was about 90 foot long.
90 feet long?
Yeah. And it produced tomatoes about the size of a cherry tomato. Now the funny thing is, because us humans are not necessarily the smartest creatures in the world, because we tend to breed and want things bigger and better, and that's not always the best case.
Right.
But
that one got a really heavy pruning.
Well,
but there wasn't much there.
He was all out of sorts. So
yeah.
But anyway, it had about 10 times the nutrition of today's commercial tomatoes that you buy.
Right.
So just because you can go bigger doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes with the philosophy of the farm. Just because you can doesn't mean you should either.
Right.
You know, I could use chemicals, but we got enough stuff in our environment that why do it when with a little smart engineering you're in pretty good shape. If you look down in between the grass there, we sowed Dutch white clover, and at a certain point we'll just let the grass grow. Well, the grass will pretty much die out and the clover will take over. But it also is a good food source for our bees, on top of them being able to pollinate off the tomatoes.
So what's been your most interesting experiment so far on the farm?
Interesting?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, the mushroom experiment, that didn't work so well.
Not this year.
Well, we were just dry and cold. Then nobody got a lot of morels, so.
Yeah, last year when we were here, Charlie was at the tail end of the morel season, and he took his leftover mushrooms that were not so good anymore and ground them up, and then
made a green milkshake.
Yes,
slurry.
Or made a milkshake out of them, and then tossed them all over.
Well,
but
cooked them for a day in 24 hours in buckets, diluted 6 buckets down. Each bucket was diluted down by 20 pails of water, and then spread it across the farm. Unfortunately, this spring we started off warm and dry, and it wasn't until, and then we got cold.
Right.
About during mushroom season. And we were still pretty dry. And then after that, we just got really wet. So I'm confident the spores are there. It's just a matter of
being able to activate them.
Sometimes conditions just ain't right. And like I said, I heard a lot of people did not get morels this year, so I don't feel too bad.
What's been your best experiment so far?
Oh, best experiment. The wood chips. It saved a lot of weeding.
Yeah?
Yeah. That and sowing the clover down.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, if I can get the clover to take off real heavy and choke out the grass, which it will eventually, then we can leave the farm green, and then we'll only have to till where we need to plant. So we're building soil life every year. It's putting 100 Dutch white clover puts about 100 to 150 pounds of nitrogen.
Per acre or
per acre, depending on the conditions.
Right.
So, I mean, we'll just have to. Oh, whoops.
Missed one.
Oh, that's a sucker. That's why you're getting pruned. I was trying to figure out why I couldn't. Oops. Well, I didn't break the growth point, so it doesn't matter, I guess. But yeah, at some point we'll probably come out here and give them a little bit more of a pruning. That guy took care of right there, but again, a lot of people say, why'd you do it? Because just for the sake of getting them up.
Now, one of the best investments Charlie has probably made in the farm, in addition to the greenhouses in the background that you see, is the little Ranger, because that's how he hauls like all of his pails and just does a lot of the heavy lifting. It also allows Charlie to give tours of the farm.
That's a Polaris Ranger.
So,
yep, works amazing. It is probably the most versatile tool. And there is a method to our madness of why our rows between our tomatoes are so wide. It's because once these things get loaded down with tomatoes and we're picking...
You pick?
Well, you pick and 10 and 12 lugs of tomatoes every day. We can drive the Ranger down, pick and drop the crates, and we don't, or just pull the Ranger ahead, pick two sides, and then put the crates in the Ranger and take them up to the farm store, and we're in bueno shape. Okay. Wow, I'm almost done.
I know.
Yay.
So is there anything else you want people to know?
I'm Charlie Puffer. No.
Okay, smarty pants.
No, it's just, we're just a chemical-free farm. You know, people go, oh, you're organic. Well, I can tell you I am not organic. And the reason I'm not organic is I believe it's important for people to know their producers. And I'll let anybody come on my farm and look at the farm anytime. The worst thing we put on any plant is diatomaceous earth. And the reason we don't go organic is, one, I don't have time to do the paperwork required. Two, it prices 2/3 of the people out of the market around here. That's why, you know, I will tell you I'm a chemical-free farm. No herbicides or pesticides go on my plants. And if anything goes on my plants, it will be organic in nature, or it'll be a natural remedy for the plant. But it's important for people to know their producer and know how they're growing. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I just believe we can good stewards to the environment and put a little bit more labor into it. Viva, can you grab me the scissors that I forgot? Thank you.
And this lovely young lady that's here on the farm with us this week, or next 2 weeks, is Viva Bass. She's a friend of Paula's, and they do art together and stuff, but she's been wanting to come up to the farm since she's been 8 years old, and this is her second trip to the farm. The first time was last year, and she got to try all kinds of things like planting tomatoes and
butchering chickens.
Butchering chickens, yes, which your parents were very proud of you for that. Did you know that?
No.
You didn't? What do you think is the coolest thing about the farm, Viva?
Say Charlie.
We experience and see how plants get to grow and see how different people pick and people plant and see all the different ways that you can plant plants instead of just planting them in your backyard and you can see them out on a giant farm.
Yeah. So what's been the funnest thing that you've done in the 2 years that you've been here?
It's okay to say it.
Maybe picking up the eggs every morning or afternoon.
Yeah. You don't have to do that, by the way. Charlie did that. Little Charlie did that earlier today, okay?
Big Charlie got the eggs. Little Charlie watched them.
Ah, gotcha. Gotcha.
And little Charlie's 22.
All right. So, Big Charlie, do you have anything to say after your big old gulp of water?
Water is God's perfect creation.
It really is. It really is.
He knew what he was doing when he made this.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And Charlie, thank you for the explanation on the Florida weave and the discussion about tomatoes. We will talk to you.